Well, it's been a quiet week in Lake Wobegon, Minnesota, my hometown, out there on the Prairie. It's been cold and bright. They've got a little more snow, and then it turned clear. And it's been very windy this last week. So that those Christmas decorations up above Main Street have been blowing in the wind. They've been trembling there and sort of quivering all week. People have been looking at them. There are 5 strings up over Main Street. They're steel cables with pressed steel figures with illuminated by bulbs there across the street. There's the holy city, and there's the angels, and there's the wise men and the shepherds, and there's the cradle scene, and there's Santa Claus. 5 of them. 2 to the north of the stoplight and 3 to the south. Mr. Bergy was out on the lake locking up his fish house late on Tuesday night. Looked up, he could see all the stars up there, but his mind wasn't on it. He was thinking about the fish that had just gotten away from him. It was a 30-pound muskellunge, the biggest muskellunge ever seen in that lake. In fact, there never had been muskellunge there before, but this was one of them. It was a 30-pounder, and he had it on the line, but the hole was not big enough to bring this fish up. The fish's shoulders got caught in the hole. And it being Christmas, Mr. Bergy reached down and let him go. He took that hook out of his upper lip. And now as he locked the door of his fish house, he was wondering if he ought to tell people about this 30-pound muskellunge. No, he thought he probably shouldn't. They probably would never believe him. That's the problem you have when you're first, when you're a pioneer. He got in his Ford Bronco and he took off, and he decided, feeling lucky, I suppose, decided that rather than take the main road off the lake through town, he'd take the back road, which is closer to his house. So he drove across the lake the other way from town, and he cut up the slope and up through a stand of red oak up there and into some alder trees, and he gunned it to go up the hill, and the snow was a little deep there and it was crusty because of the wind, and he looked off to the right as he did, and he saw town laying out there, the lights in the dark against the hill and the stars in the sky. And just that was enough to distract him, and the car slid off the road and into the ditch. Now, the thing about four-wheel drive vehicles is that they permit you to get stuck farther away than ordinary vehicles, deeper in the woods, and when you do get stuck, they permit you to get down deeper and to dig yourself farther down. And he did. He revved that thing up and gunned it, and it got right down deep, and she was stuck. The old man sat there in his car, looking out the window towards town, more than a mile away over there. It looked so silent and lovely. And it also looked very far away, a long way for a 74-year-old man with a bum ticker who's been sitting out in the ice for a couple of hours in his fish house and who just lost a big fish and who's had a little bit of peppermint schnapps. A cold, cold night. He turned on his emergency lights and he ran the engine and he turned the heater up full blast, and he noted that there was about a half a tank of gas left. He thought, Lord, don't leave me here. And he sat and he waited. Now those Christmas decorations date back to the Depression. They were bought in 1931. They were made in Milwaukee by a German company, very well made. And they were bought by public subscription. People passed the hat, they collected money, and they were so splendid and so beautiful. In 1931, you walked out on a starry night and looked at these bright lights up over Main Street, and you just knew that things were going to get better. If you were sick, you were going to get well. If you were poor, you wouldn't be for long. If you were lonely, somebody was bound to come along. That's what those lights told you. People moved away from Lake Wobegon, moved to big cities where there are magnificent Christmas displays. And yet, no matter where they went, whatever they saw later seemed a little pale and a little poor compared to the Christmas lights of Lake Wobegon in their youth. But 60 years is a long time, and they started to fall apart. Bulbs wouldn't work and pieces fell off, and there was talk of getting some new Christmas decorations to replace them. But when the vote came out in the town council to buy new ones, there was a great uproar. So they decided to renovate them, and they sent them off to a company to do it. And they paid $3,000 to have them redone. The lights came back, and they hung them up again, and they didn't look right. They looked too bright. They looked too gaudy. They looked too tinsely. They looked cheap somehow, not splendid as we remembered them. And people thought about that $3,000. Such a disappointment. Mr. Bergy sat in his car with the heater going and the engine running and the emergency lights flashing, and he thought about that $3,000. He would have gladly paid that much and more to just have somebody come by and see him up there in the alder trees deep in the snow with his emergency lights flashing. He thought, how ridiculous. People die like this, he thought. I'll never get out of this car alive, he thought. And people are going to read about this in the newspaper, and they're going to think, that old fool sitting in his Ford Bronco out in the middle of the woods at 10 o'clock in the evening doesn't have the sense that God gave geese. What was he doing up there? Taking a shortcut home. Well, he paid for it with his life. Mr. Bergy sat, and he knew this was it. And he thought about his brother. His brother lives about a mile away from him, but they haven't spoken in 25 years, which is quite an accomplishment in a small town. 25 years ago, they had a disagreement, a misunderstanding, when their dad died. And Mr. Bergy always had thought in that time that eventually he'd go over to his brother's house a mile away, and he'd walk up and knock on his door, and he'd make things right. And now it was too late. He'd die in the snow, and he'd never see his brother again. And then he thought about his toolbox in the back and remembered that the rest of that peppermint schnapps was sitting in there. And he reached back for it, about 2/3 full. And he sat down to polish it off. Pastor Ingves thought about that $3,000. He was out paying pastoral calls on the Norwegian bachelor farmers, which he hates to do. He's delegated to go out there with Christmas baskets to these old guys in their shacks out in the country. And they start complaining the moment he sets foot in that door. He walks in with a big Christmas basket, and they take one look at it, and they say, well, it's kind of puny as far as the chocolate there. Boy, it used to give out chocolate, and a better kind of chocolate than what you got there. Boy, I remember when they had good chocolate in those Christmas baskets. And now you just got little tiny dinky chocolate bars. Boy, it's not even worth opening that thing, and that canned turkey, boy, that's not worth it. Boy, give that to my dog or something. Squash, never cared for squash. I tried that cranberry last year. It was too damn salty. I just didn't care for that at all. Walnuts. We used to get pecans in that Christmas package, and now look at that. Just a bunch of ordinary walnuts. Heck, that's not Christmas. Walnuts. Pecans, that's Christmas. Well, has to sit there and listen to this litany of complaints, one after the other. Go visit a whole string of them. Thank God they're dying off. And he thinks, oh, thank goodness. Norwegian bachelor farmers, thank goodness they don't propagate. Goes from one to the other. And all the time going around visiting the bachelor farmers, Pastor Ingves is thinking about that $3,000. And he's thinking about Florida. how much he and his wife need to go there in January for the Lutheran ministers' retreat. He thinks about Florida. He thinks about it at night when he goes to bed. He crawls into bed beside his wife, lying there in her blue quilted pajamas and with the electric blanket clamped tight around her, wool socks on her feet, a cap on her head, and yet she's still cold from December through March. Freezing cold in that bed. He lies in bed and he thinks about Florida and how it would be waking up in an oceanside room, walking out the door and the smell of flowers in the air and the crash of surf, and then turning and his wife beside him, her bare arms, her bare shoulders, her naked. His wife, his beautiful wife. He thought about Florida as he drove into town from visiting the bachelor farmers, and he glanced up into the trees, into the snow, and he saw the flashing lights in the alder trees, and he thought to himself, nobody lives up there, and there's no road up there. He stopped. He hiked up through the deep snow. He opened the door, and Mr. Bergy tumbled out into his arms. There was a great cloud of peppermint schnapps breath that came with him. And he hauled the old man down the road and propped him up in his car. Mr. Bergy thanking him all the way, and then full of regret about his brother. The gratitude of a drunken man is a high price to pay for saving his life, but the remorse is even worse. Pastor Incubus thought it might be better for everybody if he just left him there in the snow. But he called Clint down at the garage, and they bought out the wrecker. And they put the cable around the front axle of that Ford Bronco. They hauled it out like a fish. And they took Mr. Bergy home, shoveled him into bed, and he stayed there for days. No, nothing changes in my town. The $3,000, the amount doesn't matter. We've been dissatisfied about the money ever since I can remember. It's always cost too much, Christmas. And we've never been satisfied, and it's never been as splendid as it was when we were children, except for children, of course. It is. But for the rest of us, it doesn't quite work out, and neither would Florida. Florida wouldn't work out. We wouldn't get an oceanside room. You know we wouldn't. We would get a freeway side room, and the semis would be shooting by all night. That's what would happen. It would never work out, and so we're going to just stay where we are. And that's what Mr. Bergy is going to do too. He's not going to go see his brother. Same thing is going to happen this year as has happened every Christmas Eve. His brother sitting in his house having a little peppermint schnapps on Christmas Eve will feel a little remorse. And he'll put on his warm parka, and he'll pick up his trumpet, and he'll get into his pickup, and he'll drive 19/20ths of a mile down to the end of Mr. Bergy's driveway. And he'll get out, and he'll stand there by the mailbox, and he'll play Silent Night. He'll play it from beginning to end, Silent Night. And then he'll get back in his pickup, and he'll drive back home. We come as close as we can. That's all we can do. That's the news from Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong and all the men are good looking. All the children are well-balanced. Have a Merry Christmas.